this working? Yes, okay, good. Welcome. We have an amazing group of panelists today to talk to you about how they are trying to leverage technology to build and inform community. And so I would like each of them, maybe we'll start with Emma, and have you guys introduce yourselves and a little bit about your project, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I am Emma Restrepo. I'm here to represent Dos Puntos platform, which is a hyperlocal media attending some of the needs of the Latina community in Philadelphia, North and South. And also we have a community newsroom made of women from the community. And we work with young journalists as well, covering some of the local news in Philadelphia, Latina.
Turn your mic on.
I think, yeah. Hey. Hello, everybody. My name is Johnny Perez-Gonzalez. I'm with WHYY, NPR affiliate. I'm a Delaware-based reporter, general assignment, so I do anything up and down the state. And it feels so good to be home at Alma Mater. I don't know, it's been so long, 3 years almost. So it's good to be here. I'm here to actually talk a little bit about our newest effort and initiative at WHYY, which is called Primer Estado. It's a WhatsApp group that unites and amplifies unity and also be resourceful for our Spanish-speaking communities or our Latino, Hispanic communities. It's a space for me to send out newsletters every Thursday from 4 to 7, have conversation, civic news to the Latino community, but as well having conversations among themselves. The group was made for them so they can communicate amongst each other, share resources, if they need help on something, or if they have questions or doubts, they can just chat amongst themselves. So it's formally informal, but so far it's been very interactive and a great success.
Hi everyone, I'm Kendall Schrohe. I'm an organizing director at Design It For Us, which is a youth-led coalition advocating for safer and better social media practices. So the group that I direct and lead at Design It For Us is called the Tech and Design Group. And what we explore there is how we, as a group of around 200 young people ages 16 to 26, can amplify the youth voice in the creation of alternative social media platforms that are trying to create better platforms with better design practices than the ones that we know and use actively today.
Hey y'all, I am Rudy Fraser. I'm the founder and CEO of Blacksky Algorithms. I'm also a fellow at the Applied Social Media Lab at the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard. Blacksky, for folks who aren't familiar, is at this point today, is a suite of open source tools that allows community builders to create online communities that they can control, from the custom feeds to the how they fund their community to controlling content moderation on the platforms. It is a part of the app protocol, and so if you've ever heard of Blue Sky, it is very much in that ecosystem. Blacksky started as a custom feed that showcased Black users' content on the network. Folks started kind of identifying around that. People started making comparisons to like Black Twitter and how folks were forming this community in this space. And fast forward a couple years, it's now been used by over 2 million people. We have a team of content moderators, volunteer content moderators, open source contributors. And now we're kind of going into this phase of trying to help other communities create similar ecosystems, because we really believe that, it's important for people to participate in global social media, but also be able to meet the needs of their specific community, right? If you're talking about billion-person social media platforms, those folks, if you just think of the problem of content moderation, they're probably gonna deploy AI and stuff. They're trying to solve for global challenges You're really trying to be like an insurance policy for your social media company and trying to stop things like CSAM or harassment. You respond to like government requests. But there is for certain communities, they're just naturally not going to be able to address those. So we want to be able to give folks those tools, and we've been very successful at creating that kind of online space that meets the needs of our community, but does not require people to be on a whole separate app or closed off or anything like that. They can still participate. They can jump into the Blacksky feed. They can report anti-Black harassment and misogynoir, and they can also participate in a global social media ecosystem. And because the nature of app protocol, it's not just tied to this singular app. Like, people are building TikTok alternatives on app protocol. People are building, Reddit kind of shaped products. And the same way your identity is owned on app protocol, your identity is owned by you. We also, and you can take your identity, your followers, your posts to other platforms if you don't like that current platform. We want to make it so you can also take your community with you to these other platforms.
So one of the things to sort of connect with some of the discussion last night in particular, I'd love to hear you guys reflect a little bit on how mainstream media and centralized social media has lost the trust of you and or your community.
I'll go first. For context, I only graduated from my undergrad a year ago. I started school in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic. My first year of college was completely online. I sat in an apartment in California with 3 girls I met on Facebook, and everything was just online. My entire existence. Making friends was online. Classes, learning was online. And when my sophomore year came around, we all went back onto campus, but we were sophomores, and at that point, we were kind of expected to have built our own communities, found clubs that we were interested in, but that didn't happen our freshman year. So when we came back onto campus, there was a very clear, at least to me, lack of community, lack of belonging, and I could see that people had become very comfortable with their online lives, and whether that was on social media or just on Zoom, and it really deeply eroded our community. There were 3 kids that year who committed suicide on my campus, and there just wasn't a lot of good energy around human connection. And I think for me, that was the first moment where I really saw, wow, like technology could really exploit our ability as humans to flourish and connect and learn, whatever it is, if designed in ways that exploit kind of the essential aspects of who we are. But at the same time, if done well, it can be used as a tool to unite people, educate people, and whatnot. But I would say that was definitely the moment for me where I was like, ooh, I'm not loving this. This isn't fun.
Also to add on and follow on that, mainstream media can be a very scary and fearful, like, I guess, field, because you focus a lot, or we always tend to focus on the bad things when it comes to the bigger picture. However, one of the reasons why the WhatsApp is very community focused is sometimes we need to shed light to where there's positivity happening, you know what I mean? For example, right, within our Spanish-speaking communities, what's happening right now is the change of policy, right? Immigration, raids, families being broken apart and divided and stuff. But here I am as the reporter shedding some light to those families, like, but there's resources out there. Here's what you can do, or here's what you need to know about the law, or stuff like that. So mainstream is very, it's a sensitive topic, but this is where, like, the tools and the technology that we're all providing to our community comes into play, because we're providing some awareness to our people, our community, who's literally firsthand in front of us or next to us, our neighbors, and also, these resources that are, giving some awareness to what's happening really and stuff.
Well, I think as a journalist and part of Dos Puntos platform, we created trust, walking the streets, in the community, grabbing coffees with them, eating and consuming from their businesses. So I will say that it was not easy, but it required time and trust and be honest with the community to build that relationship. So I started as a social media, really. We started with Facebook and Instagram because we know that the Latina community, immigrant community, they don't read an article in the Inquirer because they don't have that habit, right? So I think there is always hope, and we try to create very good content, not only visually, but also editorially speaking for the community. And we also go where they are. And that's part of the experience that we have with the community newsroom for women. Timothy was talking about that. We didn't expect that success. We have been working with these 4 women for the last 3 years, which is hard because they are alpha women and also part of the community, so it's hard to work with them. And
Can you talk just a little bit about their backgrounds?
yes, one is the owner of one of the most incredible restaurants in the Latino community in Philadelphia, Tierra Colombiana. Should you have been there, I'm sure. The other one is the director of the Cosmetologists Association. Another one is a physical therapist, and another one is advocate for the community. So she's connected all over the area with especially Latina women. And they decided that the topic that they wanted to cover is domestic violence. When I asked, okay, what is the topic that you want to cover? And all of them agreed. So we have been working on that topic, and not only creating content and in social media, but also they have their own program live. And we also create something that we call service journalism. Some pieces printed because our community still, with print stuff, and also navigating the different systems in the city, education system, democracy system, health system. We know that there is a gap that we need to try to close to help really the community to feel inserted in the community, because that's one of the problems as having another language and not being from United States. So yeah, I think there is hope.
How about you, Rudy?
And this is how centralized services kind of failed our communities. I could probably speak for a couple hours on that, but naturally also start with just blaming capitalism. App Protocol I think of as disruptive, and not disruptive in the way that people normally think of it as like just new technology. Disruptive in that it fundamentally changes how business models work, because it is public data. If you're building something on App Protocol, you can't run ads. Most centralized platforms go off of ad-based models, and as a result, they require you to keep scrolling, which is why you keep scrolling, so they can serve you ads. It's not, it's not for your well-being. It's not because they've built algorithms that are engaging for you, but it's because you scroll longer, they make more money. And App Protocol kind of disrupts that model in that you can't make an ad-driven business model. So even if, like Threads, for example, copied a lot of Blue Sky features like custom feeds, starter packs as well. So custom feeds is how Blacksky started. We could create our own algorithm Starter packs allow you to create a bunch of accounts, so people, when they get started on a platform, if you don't know anybody, here's a list of recommended accounts you can follow. Threads copied those things, but it didn't copy the underlying protocol because that would be against how they make their money. So I would say the ad-driven business model is something that let folks down. I'm also wearing some Blue Sky merch. I'm not going to pronounce it because I don't speak Latin, but it says, it means a world without Caesars. And so that's like another kind of angle, right? Elon, Black Twitter, there's been documentaries about Black Twitter. People have spilled a lot of ink on how important it was. You know, I have a favorite Jay-Z line that is, he's like, Black Twitter, what's that? When Jack gets paid, do you? For every one Gucci, support two FUBUs. And it was like, people have built, Black folks tie our community to corporations that don't necessarily pay that back to us. Black Twitter, Black TikTok. Like, Twitter changed its name. Now it's not, you know, it's not Black X, right? So it's like, there's a lack of ownership in these platforms, and then they're really just owned by whoever the CEO is at the time. And so folks, you know, Blacksky really took off in November following both, Elon acquired Twitter, and so that drove some folks over. But even then, there were all these articles that people were writing about how, you know, Black Twitter's still here, we're gonna persevere, like, you know, it's still our space, you know, even it doesn't matter who owns it, you know, okay, there's all this like hateful content, but I can avoid it in some way. People are coming up with like kind of survival mathematics of how they can like avoid the harmful content on these platforms that were just getting worse because of the owner, and not really caring for or prioritizing those users, but, you know, benefiting largely from the kind of cultural cachet that was there. And then Elon took over, and then he got very buddy-buddy with Trump, and along with all the other billionaires, right? And it was at that moment that people were like, oh, maybe we should vote with our feet. And so Blacksky grew 1.7 million users just since November. And so you can kind of see how, yeah, like money and power and control over these systems and not necessarily caring or prioritizing the users of those systems is ultimately like, yeah, kind of how they let folks down.
So on the flip side of that, what are some things on using technology, particularly social media, that bring you joy and that you would like to see more of in platforms, or that you find useful for your community that you'd like to see more of? Kendall, why don't you start this one?
I think it's interesting, you know, a lot of these big platforms that we have today, there is so much value in what they give us. My grandmother is able to see the outfits I'm wearing. My friend who's a really good knitter, she has her little knitting influencers where she can find new patterns. There are countless ways that these bigger platforms really genuinely bring value to our lives. And that's why people like them, you know? That's part of the reason why people like them. There's value. But when you provide value along with some of these more negative practices that exploit like what our weaknesses are as human, it allows us to kind of stay on these platforms, these bigger platforms that exist, while also allowing, like, you know, continuously scroll, whatever it is. But I don't know. I personally, I have hope. I think the work Design It For Us is doing right now, in the past, we've done a lot more work in relation to policy reform for these big tech platforms, where we're trying to get that, like, through law, actually change the design practices, like more privacy measures, more safety measures, whatever it is. But I think it's important, and I think part of the reason we're all here is that we have to support alternative forms of social media, because technology isn't going away. And we still want those beautiful parts, the value that the platforms give us. We want to be able to connect with the people we love. We want to be able to inform our communities. We want to be able to learn our new knitting patterns without sitting on our phones for 8 hours before we go to bed, or seeing like disordered, whatever it is. And I think there are a lot of people, through some of the research I've done, there are a lot of people, like the 3 people sitting here, who are really being intentional about the spaces they're creating. And I think the more we can support and spotlight these platforms and other places and other people who really want to just bring you value. And I don't know, the business model conversation is another one, which I have many thoughts on as well. But if we can give a little bit more support and light to alternative communities, I think there is a lot of hope for the future of social media and media. And I really think this translates to some of the conversations you'll be having later about the importance of local news and finding your people and places that bring you the value you want.
I totally agree with Kendall, and for us, there is a lot of joy, and also it's also fair to bring some of the stories of people in the Latino community that usually they are not present in bigger media. So for us, it's an opportunity to bring those stories, and they are the ones who talk. They are the ones who are telling the stories, not us as a journalist. And we more and more are using bilingual content. So when they are talking in Spanish, we have, thanks to technology, we have some captions in English, because we also realize that there are some things that are happening in our communities that for us are completely common, but they are not for Americans. And when we don't talk in that language, those stories don't arrive to the ears of some American community. So I think that's thanks to technology, and it's such a wonderful situation to see them in the media, in social media, with good quality.
Could you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just wondering what kinds of things bring you joy in using social media or technology, and what would you like to see more of?
So on my take, I think we all kind of agreed to everything. But similarly, like dos puntos, I think for me, where I find joy and where I feel like my job is, I'm going on the right direction, is when I see my community, my Spanish-speaking communities, actually interacting amongst each other. When was it? It was this past weekend or the end of last week, where I sent out my newsletter and everybody hearted it. They liked my voice note that I sent. It's very like casual, you know, like as if I'm talking to somebody on a voice note, like on iMessage or something. And you know, it was really nice to see those replies and the likes, because it does show to me that there's people out there that's listening to that. But even after that, right, it was a Friday or Saturday morning, I don't know what day exactly it was, but a lady messaged in the group chat talking about, hey, I need some help, or I'm in doubt, guys. Can you guys help me out, or what's your take on this? So for me, I think seeing my community and the people in those group chats, you know, talking and interacting with each other is beautiful. If that can continue and grow, and people just sharing the app and just joining in just because they want to do it and just be part of the dialogue, that to me is heaven. I do want to say though, with the stories that I'm writing, with the stories that I'm sharing in that app that's translated into Spanish, and also includes that, you know, English translation for, you know, a lot of us Americans who English is our first language, I want to make sure too that there's dialogue amongst everybody too, because they need to know what the Latino or the Spanish-speaking culture is like, or what's happening within those communities, you know? So I think that brings me a lot of joy, and hopefully a lot of people learn a lot.
one of the things we talked about in our preparatory call was the reason why you selected WhatsApp as the mechanism for this. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I don't know if I have a lot of Spanish-speaking people here or Latinos, but if there are Latinos in the house, as you guys might know, WhatsApp is a very international app. It's free. You can make phone calls or video chats across the country, and it's literally what a lot of Latinos use. And I wouldn't even put it a category for Latinos. For a lot of undocumented people, a lot of immigrants, they use that app to communicate with their grandma that's in Guatemala, or their, I don't know, tia or tío that's in Argentina, or et cetera, or in Africa even, you know? So it's a very like resourceful use, and we saw that a lot of, especially for my targeted audience, the Spanish-speaking communities, they're all on WhatsApp. And it's clear that that's what they use, because every single day I see them adding each other into my group, and it's nearing to 100 right now. We just like launched it, so
You're
it's been
just 2
great.
months in, right?
Yeah.
How about you, Rudy? What brings you joy on social media? What do you want to see more of?
So the things that I find very joyous, you know, it was funny. Yesterday, I think that in the keynote, there was some like kind of ominous messages about the state of journalism and media, and I was just in the corner there, like scrolling Blacksky, and we were like, you know, bonding over Met Gala outfits. You know, I think it's important for there to be spaces for folks to, you know, with everything going on, like you need a place to have expression. I think Andre Brock, he's written a bunch of stuff about Black Twitter. He wrote a book called Distributed Blackness. He talks about libidinal expression and the importance of that. And that's just really like Black people kind of like living out their everyday lives, just being themselves is a very important thing. And so that brings me joy. You know, there's stuff like the Met Gala. Again, we like do a lot of like bonding around cultural events. The Tyson fight was the first time the Blacksky feed had 1 million views in a single day. And so like that was, you know, and the servers were crashing, but then the next day I checked and like there was like a post with like 10,000 likes that was like Blacksky survived its first cultural event. And that's that. I love that. I think because of this like weird space that social media plays, people often forget that people go to social media for very different reasons. Yes, it is a place to be informed. It's also a place to make connections and make friends. It's also a place to just, you know, some people just use it as entertainment. And it needs to kind of serve all these different purposes. And it can serve all those different purposes. There's nothing implicitly like in the architecture of a social media app that makes it have to be one way or the other. It's more so the interest of the person designing it. And as a person who designs algorithms, I can, you know, it's the experience of designing an algorithm and trying to meet all those needs, like wanting to make something that's, okay, this is, you know, fun conversation. You know, actually just on the piece of moderation, it's been very interesting. People often think that, okay, we do anti-Black harassment, and so we're dealing with like people saying the N-word. Well, we have that pretty much automated for the most part in like handling those. Intra-community conflict is much more challenging. Like Black folks having debates and having differing opinions. There was an exercise yesterday of like how often do you encounter stuff that is like you maybe it differs from your past beliefs and stuff. And I kind of was, you know, on other apps, never. But on Blacksky, pretty frequently. And the differing opinions, it's like, all right, well, you know, this kind of does represent the like diaspora, like where all these different beliefs are and people are, and as long as the conversations are respectful, I think that's kind of what we want. And I've basically believed that as long as you create a space, if you create a space where like Black women and trans folks can have a good time, queer folks can have a good time, then you've made a safe space. Like if it's safe for them, it's generally safe for everyone. And once you create safety, you create a place that people can experience joy. So I love that. I also love, I'm a mutual aid organizer, very importantly, with We the People NYC. We give out hot food and clothing in Bed-Stuy and Harlem every Thursday and Saturday. And unfortunately, I've been on the road for the last few weeks, so haven't been with them, but my heart's with them. And that kind of community building, like being active in your neighborhood, influences a lot of how I think about and build Blacksky, also as like open source software. So what brings me joy in it as well is like people taking an active part in building their social media experiences, not just being the kind of, like it's totally cool to just kind of passively participate, but I do love the folks who, there's people who have helped build documentation for how Blacksky works. They explain to each other how it works and why it's important. And seeing that, like, yes, it's super cool when people are like, oh, this is the most affirming experience that I've had on social media in X many years, and there are like 100 replies under that, and people just kind of like bigging each other up, and that's cool, but I think it's like, compliments are kind of easy, especially like there was lots of accusations in that, like in November of like, oh, this is just a honeymoon phase, like, you know, it's gonna, like this isn't gonna last, but when people really have skin in the game, they've put time into building a space up and like really putting their identity and kind of online personas behind something, that brings me a lot of joy. Because now I feel like you've built something bigger than just a fad. You've built something where people are truly like having deeper relationships. You know, I meet people from online. I think that's really cool. And those relationships are no different than people I've worked with in person and stuff. So yeah, so all those things, all the aspects of online community building really, really bring me a lot of joy.
So I'm sensing, because Johnny, part of what you said too was that you enjoy when the people have conversations with each other and try to help each other out. So it's sort of that ability to have a space where they feel free enough and safe enough that they can be vulnerable in some ways and ask for help. And I think that's part of what that's what I enjoy on social media as well. Kendall, I wanted you to talk just a little bit. I know you did some research recently about alternative types of social media. I was wondering if you could talk about like the basic types that there are, but also why these alternative types of social media have trouble taking off.
Yeah, I definitely can talk about that. So yeah, a few weeks ago, I did some research with the Sustainable Media Center and Accountable Tech on just exploring what alternative social, I don't like to say social media. I had a conversation the other day with someone who is actually building a social media app, but they said they would prefer to refer it as a social utility or a social tool, because now what used to be social is combined with media, and I think that's actually where a lot of the problems lie with some of the current platforms. Is like you were saying, you have to cater to every single different need on one platform, and when there are different people with different needs and it's only one place, it gets a little dicey. Nonetheless, so I was researching these social tools, social utilities that were different than the big platforms that we have today, to see, are there people out there who are hearing and seeing the cries from young people and communities who want real connection, want the ability to thrive online without all of the negatives that some of the big platforms have. And what started off as just trying to explore, find 30 or something, ended up being 150, and that was just taking a crack on the ecosystem that exists out there. And I think some of the main takeaways from the research were there is definitely a large amount of platforms who are trying to use technology to bring people in person more. There are a lot of platforms like yours that are using decentralized frameworks or trying to be open source. So the foundation of these, the technical architecture of these platforms is just like inherently more respectful to your identity than some of these bigger platforms. There are also some platforms that are really trying to be intentional about the design choices. So they want it to have a chronological feed. I don't know if people remember like the old Instagram where it was just, you just scrolled through. Like there was no algorithm, you just had your friends on there. And obviously there were still advertisements. And the great thing about some of these intentional platforms is they want to be ad-free, or they are ad-free, and they are sustaining themselves either through like subscription models where the users who want to be on the platform are like paying to be on the platform instead of the bigger platforms that are making their profits through advertisers that target your insecurities and all sorts of things. Let's see, what else? There are some interesting ones too, where they have like a focus on keeping like a smaller community where like you're only allowed to have 100 followers, or you're only allowed to post a certain number of times, just experimenting with creative ideas. And then I would say another category, which I think the general public is probably a little more aware of, is the rise of like niche platforms, like a Letterboxd or Belly. Letterboxd, for context, I don't have it, so if I'm wrong, someone correct me. It's to rate TV shows and movies and share them with the people you know. And then Belly, it's like you can rate your restaurants and share them with the people you know. So there's this shift kind of to these smaller niche platforms where you can find people who have the same interests as you without, having to, I've said it again and again, scroll. So yeah, there's a lot of like interesting and awesome innovation going on in the social utility tool space, and that's part of the reason I think I have a lot of hope.
Why do you think they're not taking off in the same way?
So I think one of the biggest issues is actually within ourselves. People don't always, we were talking yesterday, is people don't always want to do what's best for them. They want to, a lot of times humans want what's easy, what's convenient, and they want like the Costco's of the world where they can go to Instagram and they can get everything they need all at once, all in one place. They don't have to download like 8 different apps that serve the 8 different interests or needs that they want. But with that comes a lot of negatives, I heard something the other day with Meta. They basically have the ability when like a young woman, she posts a selfie on Instagram and then deletes it right after. They're able to recognize that as like a sign of insecurity and then target her with specific advertisements, whether it's like for weight loss or acne medications, after she deletes a selfie. It's like insane. And just people shouldn't have to be exposed to that type of stuff just because they want to connect with their loved ones. So I don't know. I think they're like on top of regulation. I think we as humans really need to think about like, how much do we like value ourselves? Like, what are we willing to put ourselves for, or what are we willing to put ourselves through to just like get all of the needs that we want met in one place? Like, is that worth it to us? I don't know. I mean, I still have Instagram. I still scroll on it. Like, it's a lot easier said than done. But I think the reason some of these alternative platforms have a hard time taking off is because like we don't actually always want what is best for us. I mean, and then on top of that, once again, it's hard to create a startup or company without investors that only really care about the bottom line. So you have to be really innovative and smart about the way you want to keep these platforms alive. And yeah, I think that's where we as humans come in and like have to really support these alternative platforms and like choose ourselves, value ourselves. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience. The last question I wanted to ask you, Emma, which is you have, for your community newsroom, it's a group of women, and you're doing stories about domestic violence. We know that female journalists are the most often targeted, and particularly when they are doing stories that center gender. And so I just am curious how you are dealing with that possible problem, if you have had some problems, and what you're doing to keep those community members safe.
Yeah, just before that, I totally agree with you, Kendall, and I will say that as tools, social media, we use it for the work that we are doing. I don't use it too much for personal things, and I rather to connect with people in the real world. And about the question, yes, sometimes it's challenging to work with that topic, domestic violence. Actually, we will have an event next week, and the event is kind of a closed event. All the time we try to don't be so public or so massive, because we know that it's always a risk. So we try to be very gentle when we do something. Sometimes we have kind of, not quite often, but we have some kind of ugly comments sometimes from men in our social media. But I think it's also showing that we are having some kind of impact. And another thing that is not connected with gender, we have been kind of pushers with the organizations that have to provide some help for women in the city related with domestic violence. They don't like it. But I think these women that are not journalists are doing that job. And sometimes we feel kind of threatened in the way that the organizations say, oh, so we don't want to work with you. But because we are a voice of change and advocacy, and those we are handling it, and it's challenging to handle it, those kind of things. Yeah.
Great. Do we have folks that have microphones for us? Okay, you're grabbing them right now. So any questions for the panelists?
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, because everything was really inspiring for us, and also because you are working in something that you love, and this is the most important when you have an initiative. And I can see in your eyes that all of you loves what you are doing. This is really inspiring for us. For me, it's really, really inspiring. I would like to ask you about, all of us has different fights, has different initiatives, and we work with people, young people, and how we can break the line between past generations. For example, in my case, I have also an initiative of youth people in Bolivia, and we create content in social media. Everything, everybody is enjoying that content, but all of them are young people. But what about past generation? How we can involve with them? Because, okay, our fights are important. We are working on climate change, whatever. But I think that it's necessary to connect with other generations, because If not, maybe they can think, young people are thinking in other things. They don't care about us or whatever. So it's something that I ask me all the time, how we can connect, because nobody of the past generation has the accessibility to Instagram, TikTok. We know, but maybe they are more complicated.
That's a beautiful question, especially for me. The whole team of Dos Puntos platform is super young. So it's very interesting when we work together, see the multi-generation thing and also multi-gender. So it's very, I think for me, I'm the older one. So it's really cool to see the world in the eyes that they are seeing the world. So we try all the time, and I try all the time to say, hey, that is a generational thing. So what about if we explore this and that? I know you don't like me to say this because I know it's a generational thing. So please be careful or be acknowledged that I'm an older generation, so we understand things in a different way. So we are very conscious about this multi-generational thing and multi-gender thing, but also our work outside. This year, we started to, as an editorial policy, to cover second-generation immigrants, because it's something that we don't see too much in our media. And also, it's a way to respond in a respectful and conscious way to the administration, the current administration, that wants to us outside of the country. It's a way to say, well, we are here some time ago, so sorry, honey, but we will be still here. And we want to show that generation, because that generation, and third generation, actually. We work with a Mexican, Colombian journalist, third generation, and that's a way to integrate everybody.
Yeah, just real quick from a hacker's perspective, I think a bit also of what I would add to what Kendall was saying is that there's certainly, yes, there's like personal decisions in what social media service you use. There is network effects for these powerful platforms. You want to be where your friends and families are. Also, the technical design of some of these services make it a challenge. Sometimes folks ask me, why didn't I build Blacksky on ActivityPub or Mastodon? If you're familiar with those tools, the issue is that I can never see my mom or my cousins using it, particularly my mom, because you have to, with Mastodon, you have to know the server that you're going to sign up with. There's different apps you can download. It's very complicated. But my mom uses Blue Sky, she uses Blacksky, and I didn't have to explain that to her. I have to set up her Gmail account and her iPhone, but she doesn't. She didn't need an explanation to know how to use the Blacksky feed. So I think, and also I know this also from another project that I worked on prior to Blacksky, which was called Paper Tree. I was trying to create a community bank account for the neighborhood of Bed-Stuy, and in that, we ended up. Now the kind of biggest user of that is this nonprofit called Gather4 that is trying to demonstrate their mission is that in community you have all that you need, and they have these neighbor teams of 10 folks, largely older women. They have a whole program where they provide childcare for each other. They do mental health check-ins, and they do this thing called a susu, which their cultures all around the world have versions of this where they everyone puts money into a community pot and then someone gets that money at the end of the month. They use Paper Tree for that. And in designing it, we were given very strict directions on how to design it for those users, right? It had to be dead simple. It had to be mobile friendly. It's actually pretty surprising that some advanced technologies are more used by communities than maybe other technologies are. For example, mobile was adopted, there's a bunch of research black folks adopted mobile technology faster than a lot of black and brown folks adopted mobile technology a lot faster than other communities because it was just easier to use for them. So we were asked to build this into an app or make it really accessible, really clear language, really clear copy. So I think for making things, it's really about it's generational. It's also just accessibility, right? There's just people have different accessibility needs, and so building products that are as accessible as possible, as simple as possible, I think is the kind of way that you adopt that. And that one of the challenges is like, you know, there's all this cool stuff you could build with like app protocol, and one of the challenges I have is like explaining it very simply, very easily, why you should use this versus use that.
I'd like to get another question in, if that's all right. I know somebody here had, yeah, there we go.
Thank you so much. This is fascinating. My question, I think, is mostly for Kendall and Rudy, and I want to ask about AI chatbots. And I'm curious, Rudy, if you all are exploring or maybe it already exists, and what kind of guardrails and you're considering for it. And Kendall, if you've encountered social utility platforms that are using AI chatbots in responsible ways, I think I'm reflecting on the fact that your generation in a lot of ways was the first to grow up with social media. It was completely uncharted territory. Nobody, even now we're still understanding the consequences of completely unregulated use. And I think a lot of us are now fearful and excited about what AI can bring, but I am genuinely concerned about what it'll mean for like this next generation. So, thank you.
I will try to keep it brief. Hold me to it. So as far as AI goes, there's a lot of interest in doing it with content moderation. First of all, I think it's very weird when people try to make new social networks and they're like, social media, but all the people are AI. And it's like, that seems like anti-social media to me, so that's weird. But I do think there is a use for AI in content moderation. For example, content moderation is like the most traumatic, like whatever you think you've seen is the most traumatic thing on the internet, picture that, but 10 times worse, and that is what a content moderator experiences on a daily basis. Like, I won't even describe the things that I've seen. But AI makes some of that a little bit easier to, especially when there's like dog whistles or nuances. So an example of where I use it is like, quick show of hands, anyone know, does Rhodesia ring any bells or strike any chord? Right, neither for our moderators, but it's a white supremacist dog whistle. And so when we see that in a profile, like sometimes I'll be like, I'll ask them, we have a moderation flow where the moderators, if they don't understand something or why something was reported, they will escalate to me, and then if I don't recognize it, I will put it into ChatGPT, literally, is Rhodesia as a profile, in your profile name with this profile picture, a white supremacist dog whistle? And it'll be like, probably yes. And give you a long explanation of like why, and then we could put that into our documentation if anyone ever wants to appeal something or bring it up later, and then we have this kind of corpus that we can go off of. We also, for coming up with our standard operating procedures for how I can onboard a team of people, I exported all the moderation decisions we made previously, 100,000 moderation decisions in the last few months, and put that into ChatGPT and was like, can you update our SOP to cover these cases so we can clearly explain to the moderators when you label a post as anti-Black versus when you label a whole account as anti-Black versus when you escalate it. So content moderation is very an interesting angle for social media. It has, when you talk about the human interface with AI directly, like with chatbots, I think that's like a little, it's a whole like a rabbit hole of, you know, a whole can of worms there, but I think AI in terms of, I would just generally believe in like tools helping humans, not replacing humans. So when it does that, I think it's good.
I think that's a good place to stop because we're at time. I feel like we could go on for hours, but thank you guys so much for being here and for sharing the exciting work that you're doing.
Let's give a hand to the panel. So this session is going to wrap up. We have a 15-minute break till the next session. So if you haven't signed up for others, we'd encourage you. You've got that little badge. You're welcome to stay for the next session or any of the others and bring others back too. But a lot of these panelists will be with us throughout the day and at the reception this evening here in the multipurpose room. So we'd encourage you to ask some of those questions then. Thank you.